Unagru is an architecture and urbanism practice based in London with a diverse group of collaborators in the office. The studio was founded by Davide Di Martino as a network for discussion, collaboration, and design related to the urban domain, with the belief that space design can influence lives on personal, societal, and environmental levels. And that is exactly why today we will be conversing about stimulating livable future through sustainable homes with Davide himself. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Karina. It's great to be here.
That's our pleasure. So will you first tell us about your background in the studio?
Yes, of course. So I'm a Southern Italian. I'm from Napoli, and I studied there as well as in Venice and Barcelona for my undergraduate. I guess the most important experience I had as an undergraduate was meeting Bernardo Secchi, who was a very, very influential urban planner, probably my favorite person at the time, definitely. And so that encounter, which then resulted in my thesis and graduation, sparked my interest for urbanism and urban questions in general, which of course span from society to construction to the environment and ecology. And I think I said this as a pivotal moment. Then after that, I went back to Naples and started working again on a large project I was awarded, luckily, or that never happened in the end. And then while I was doing this, I won a PhD. And even though my background was mostly architectural, I decided to study urbanism again. And in that case, was like on ecology and landscape urbanism. There was a big pollution issue in my region at the time, and I thought I would kind of save the world somehow. But this kind of left with me this passion for ecology and complexity in general, because ecology has to do with environmentalism and sustainability and all the rest. But in many ways, it's also a way of thinking. There's the complexity of feedback loops, of everything. So then I moved to actually, during the PhD, I saw this small crane bird that gives the name to the practice. Unagru means one crane, which is both the bird but also the machine that kind of lifts weights, and it's the same in Italian and in English. And so I like this ambiguity between artificial and natural, which was very much the basis of my work as a PhD student as well. So I moved to London and I wanted the big city adventure, and I started working in a practice. Ian Ritchie Architects, very, very high quality, almost high technology practice. So they taught me a lot about quality and quality assurance and construction and real life problems. And then finally, a friend asked me to design a house, and I started off kind of in my spare time. And then in 2017, 18, I was completing my own. And actually in 2018, I hired my first person. And then finally, Unagru was kind of back in business. And I think a little bit the story of the crane and my background, I think kind of sums it all up, in the sense that even small projects are part of a complex system in our experience or in our ethos or in our way of thinking. So we try to expand as much as possible the context of every project. And that's something I've learned, through the years. Now I also teach urban design research, architecture design research, but my focus is mostly on urban architecture or urban design at Cardiff University, and that's a very, of course, engaging endeavor. Although a bit stressful, of course, managing many things at once. So that's so Unagru now we're five. There's me, Thomas, Gary, Jamie, and David, and we work mostly on private residential projects, but we try to expand our portfolio as much as possible. So we worked on a few restaurants, we do a few larger projects, we do the odd competition. And lately, we've been working also with kind of community buildings. So we do a project pro bono every year, or every couple of years, let's say. Depends on how long these last. Now we're just finishing one for a nursery, which is also a charity. We got them some money, we fixed the building, we had kind of grand plans of expansion and extension and sophisticated architecture, but in the end, the priority was to just fix the building. So that's what we did, and we're proud of it. And in the future, we're looking to kind of more diversity of work, of portfolio, and new collaborations. And university will probably be an opportunity for this. I hope.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you.
How would you describe your design approach and what inspired it?
Yeah. So I think the design approach is really tied to the background and to the whole development. I really like the idea of complexity. So I like that even a simple question, like sometimes a project could be, is instead expanded into understanding its widest possible context. So and so is to make it into a wicked problem, into a problem that has several little nooks and crannies. And that's not because I just like to make things difficult or to get paid more. It's just because we live only once. There's a lot of money and energy and carbon involved into a project. There's a lot of stress, and it's really life-changing for the clients. And I think it would just be a pity if it were just a transaction between an immediate need and the result. If it's just that, it's a massive missed opportunity. So in our case, we said we try to build this big matrix of the problem, and instead of we like to, instead of just facing a project, we're having a conversation with a situation. That's kind of our way of thinking. So let's put together things, and first and foremost, very essential is the client, who has its own experiences, its own kind of, everyone is a bit special and crazy in their own way. We try to identify this. And then there is this other special thing, which is the building itself and what attracts one to the other. I mean, the client has been attracted by something. Sometimes they want to really replace, change everything. Other times there's something that grounds them there. And then we look into other networks, let's call it. So we look at the historical context, we look at the architectural context, we look at, well, where the water was in the old days when it was all exposed. We looked at the old topography, and we try to identify, and all of this is to try and identify that kind of magic spark, that name that is unique to that project. And sometimes it comes from the client, sometimes it comes from the context, and sometimes it's a mix of the two things. Sometimes it comes from inside. It's a way of living. So that's, I think that's our approach. The idea is to do something special. We have in the UK, we have every architectural project is split into 6 stages, 6.5, 7, depending on size and complexity. But around stage 3, it's kind of the middle ground where you have your final design. And most of the times, people will be finished with the design. Stage 3, you're done. But actually, stage 3 for us is a moment when we just put everything back on the table and say, okay, now let's look at it from sustainability and materials point of view. Let's look at it from an economic point of view, and we just kind of rejig things. And those are all opportunities for something special to happen. Finally, there are, of course, aspects that we also like that are purely architectural, that are purely our research into the way people live. And so those also kind of, even though we call it always a conversation with a situation, there are aspects that are really much ours. So we like these open flowing spaces, which are quite difficult to achieve here because of fire regulations. But we like these open spaces to be very eventful. So never just a big room. It's always a big room with a box inside, or a big room that wiggles around something so that there's pockets of privacy, and many things happen. And so what it ends up being is this long process of layering questions and answers and opportunities, and trying to put them all together into something that is very eventful. That many things happen. There's many opportunities, so we take them all, and at the same time is very clear and very powerful. Has a clear narrative. That's more or less it, I think.
I guess that's how you try to foster a connection between the different skills of impact, right? Maybe through an example, you want to share about the effects of it.
Yes. For example, in one case, the clients just wanted to do a new garden, actually a new terrace in the patio. And we suggested in that case to look into the impact of paving part of the garden, which would have been an impact on the water cycle. So we said, okay, you want to pave it, but what are we going to do with all this water? And what can we do with even better? Why don't we manage the water coming from the roof as well? So rather than just being a patio, we did the patio with a rain garden, which is like a swimming pool looking object that collects all the water coming from the roof and the terrace itself. And then it stores it in this big planter. And then if there's an overflow, the overflow goes back to the sewer, but just to avoid flooding. And so this, and we built the rain garden reusing the old paving stones. We just use them as like little bricks. So in that case, rather than just, it's a tiny, simple example, but rather than just looking for a practical and aesthetic outcome, we've introduced this idea of reducing flood risk all around, improving biodiversity, because this is a very particular kind of landscape, and also improving the water cycle in the area. So that's just one example. In another case, instead, we're approaching sustainability from an embedded carbon point of view. So rather than using steel structures, we're using glulam timber structures. We're limiting the amount of concrete we're using so that it's to the bare minimum. Insulation is wood fiber insulation, lime plasters, all these natural materials that have a cost, but also lots of advantages for the environment. In that case, it's a matter of what networks of materials and companies we're using. We're making richer, and we're also involving in the process.
So in a larger scope, maybe, how have you approached sustainability in residential architecture? Although you kind of touched upon it, but what have you found to be the challenges in realizing it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, again, sustainability is very important to us. So when we discuss it, we discuss it on 4 levels. The first level, and so basically what happens, construction has a massive impact on climate change, and I think we all kind of agree that right now the most important focus is on carbon and biodiversity. Those are 2 things that we are very concerned about. So one is waste, another one is steel and concrete, and the other one is, of course, the consumption of energy that buildings have. And so we approach it on all 4 ways. The first one is waste. Now there's several ways of calling architecture or construction waste, but for us it's a matter of how do you look at what is already there? Do you have an open-minded approach to what is already there? And can the best energy is the energy that you don't use? Can we avoid bits of this intervention? And so there's a famous story about Cedric Price, an incredibly clever English architect who was appointed to build a house for a couple, but the couple was bickering all the time, was fighting all the time. At some point, Cedric Price says, "I know the solution to this project is not to build a house, and you two sort your problems out." So in that's like a very pragmatic approach to sustainability. And if it's not necessary, just don't do it. That's a lot of money and carbon saved, energy saved in so many ways. Another approach, kind of more architectural, is to find beauty in what is there, and often this means having a bit more of an open mind towards what is already there. So that's the first one. The second one is what we were discussing just before, the embedded carbon. So we try to reuse materials as much as possible. We try to, so embedded carbon is the amount of carbon dioxide that cost that was used to create the materials we're putting into the building. So a steel beam is possibly the most carbon intensive thing in the world. Probably, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. Concrete is very carbon intensive as well. So of course, construction is carbon intensive. Now, we try to use the least possible amount of concrete, the least possible amount of steel, as much timber as possible. And the same thing goes through all materials. Basically, the more timber you use, the better, and the more recycled material you use, the better. So often some of our projects are very delicate from the outside, from the inside. You'll see the cellist house. It looks like perfect from the inside. It's got like very little quirks, but mostly it's like spotless. Then you see the rear facade, and it's got this kind of rough brick. So why is this brick so rough? It's just reclaimed. You just bought secondhand brick that doesn't look great at the beginning. It will take like some 5-6 years before it weathers and becomes nicer. So that's the second approach, which is embedded carbon. The third one is, of course, how much how much energy does the building consume to operate, and that's a matter of how well it's thermally insulated. And I mean, we're just technically very careful to this. Right? We just have to be careful. Perhaps the only interesting aspect of this in this country is that, or for more small practices in this country, is that we work mostly with existing buildings. And those buildings, you can't just kind of insulate. You have to be very careful because they have their own balance with humidity, water coming through. So they breathe. And so there's a different approach. We're part of this group that's called the Green Register of Construction practitioners or professionals, actually. So we can regularly go to courses to see what are the best products and the best approaches to, especially retrofitting, because it's the most complex aspect. And then finally, I think I just touched on it. There are the ecology and water related aspects. So we try to incorporate green roofs, water management, sustainable urban drainage systems. And when we design a garden, or when we ask someone to design a garden for us, we always ask them that it's wild and very, very diverse, rather than the lawn. You'll see the sponge, for example, it's a jungle basically. You can't see anyone just lose people into the garden, and it's tiny. It's just that the way it's built. So that's really our approach to sustainability.
It's amazing. Will you then share one or two of your projects that show us just that?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to show you two projects. One is called The Sponge, and it's this one that you're seeing in front of you. And it's a project that shows our approach to design in terms of space, most importantly. In this case, it was a couple of a young family that was growing and that wanted a good relationship to a garden, a space into the basement for office, and a more modern and contemporary, of course, lifestyle. They both have this Indian, Southeast Asian, Southern Asian background. Therefore, we looked into these kind of darker woods, darker materials that would fit the best contemporary architecture of the countries they came from, or more in general, it's just a common love for some architects, like Studio Mumbai, for example. So in this case, the main aspect that I want to show is the layout, which you can see here. So this was the original house. As you can see, the typical, kind of a typical terraced house with a wider area on the street side and a more narrow area that they called outrigger volume at the back. And you can see how fragmented this is. You come into a room, then there's one door, actually two doors into this other room, another room. It's all very boxy, and the garden is so far away. And the only connection to the garden is this small door. So of course we work on a more interesting approach to the space, but on a wider approach to the space. So basically what happens here is that we extend this into this area and slightly, we just rebuild this actually slightly smaller compared to what it was before. But the main focus, there are a number of main focuses. One is to establish a relationship with the garden. And for this reason, we kind of bring the ground floor to a lower level here, which is the garden level. The second is to have this open flow. But as I was mentioning, the open flow has to be controlled and manipulated in a way that it doesn't result into just one big space. So in this case, we have this fire sliding door that a quirky, wider entrance compared to the usual quirky, wider entrance. And then you come into this space where you can see it's 1 and 2 and 3 movements, and there is one object in the middle that kind of creates one larger space at the front, a kind of a threshold intermediate space in the middle, and this space at the back. But even these are further separated because the space at the back is kind of highlights and outlines the area for the dining room behind this element. And all the service area is hidden inside this other element, which is a piece of joinery. And this area here is kind of like a greenhouse. That's an intermediate location between this area, which is the kitchen, and the garden itself. So let's go back to the photos and see if I can navigate you through them. So so this is the view from the outside. This is the view from the garden. And this is upon entering the house. So you see that when you come in, when you come in here, this element is a timber slatted box. It's this element that creates a filter between front and rear without actually separating the two. You see that you can still see through this, but the front, which is more kind of like the formal living, and the rear are completely connected. You can still speak to one another, but there's a slight difference in levels, just 3 wide steps. And this element filtering here, and also the shape of the joinery that creates a compression in the middle, slightly separates the two. So when there's a party, it's one big place, and it's actually playful because people can climb up and down from the basement in different areas. But at the same time, when you're sitting here, you don't feel like you're inside a massive gym. You feel kind of cozy and well protected. And the same thing is for the dining area, where you feel like you're cocooned inside the between the slatted box and the envelope of the house. This piece of joinery is this element that has become one of our kind of typical ways of working, where we try and compress all that is needed on the ground floor. I'll zoom it a little bit into this seamless piece of joinery that in this case has all the storage they need on the ground floor, access to a WC which is hidden inside, the full height cabinets for the kitchen, and then it becomes again the kitchen and even more storage. So all of this kind of takes you from the entrance to the garden, all the while changing height and changing slightly shape, but also but most importantly, shaping the space inside. So this one is kind of cocooned, this one opens out towards the garden, and this one is clearly pointing like a single object towards the garden. Then, of course, there's again, this box also contains the stairs that go down into the basement, which look like this, with a fish tank underneath. There is an interior. This box also has, you can see here, we do often, you see this little tap? This to create a small greenhouse inside so that they can have automatic irrigation. And if you've seen the garden, is what I was talking to you about. The garden is very wild, very biodiverse, soaks up a lot of water, and really contributes to the landscape around it. It's quite interesting to see the difference between this house and this neighbor, where the lawn is perfectly flat. Or in other cases, you could see these lawns that are kind of made of fake grass, etc. It's just the opposite. And of course, this project has further complexities. There's a basement that has another kind of complex shape. The loft as well as its own complexities. You can see it here. But yeah, in a nutshell, these are our main design topics. You can see when you come in, you see different things as you move around, and there's always something happening. Even if it's the door to the bathroom here, the access going down into the basement, different types of light. So light here is frosted, is slightly more controlled above the slatted timber wood box, whereas it's transparent here because it's more clear, and it's what you want to see when you're sitting down. You want to see the sky. So there are several kind of other little approaches. The stair to the top is treated as a lantern, basically, as letting the light through. So the whole stairwell works as a light well, and that's why the house is called a sponge, because every opportunity to bring light inside is also taken advantage of. So the second project I'd like to show you is the house for a cellist. You can hear also the names that we give projects are important to us. They're kind of witnessing the fact that it's not just a site extension. It's not the house for someone. It's not their address. It's a very specific, special thing that happens in that place. In this case, it's the house for a cellist. Now, the name house for a cellist, of course, kind of just means what it is. It's a house for someone who plays the cello. But this client is more than that. He's also a scientist. His everyday job is working with a Google lab that sorts in artificial intelligence and several other things. But he is also a semi-professional or professional cellist. And when he's at home, is he more of a scientist and an artificial intelligence expert, or is he more of a cellist? And does the house reflect more his cellist side or his scientist side? Well, of course, both. But if there's something that the house can accommodate, is this very important and like spatially driven activity, which is playing music. And also, this person has a very complex and very busy life. Therefore, he needs a peaceful interior to work with, to work in, and to live in. And so you see kind of this very soft palette of materials. And so here I'd like to show you very quickly the combination of the topics we've discussed before: the open space, the pockets of privacy, boxes within the open spaces that kind of further break down the space, creating these kind of ambiguous threshold areas. But also how we've integrated a bit more the sustainability aspects of the project. So this is the typical view from the inside. This is the most, perhaps I should start with the plans. Yes, let's start with the plans. Typical Victorian house. In this case, it doesn't have an outrigger, but just a small extension at the back. This house is tiny, yeah, tiny. From here to here, it's 4 meters. Okay, so it's tiny. And this side, this is the front, the entrance, it's directly onto the street. So when we first visited the house, this window was always shut because there's zero privacy. It's the same height as the street. So someone coming through can just, look inside, say hi. It was a disaster. And this dark area with zero windows, just this connection outside, was where he practiced the cello. There was a beautiful light coming down from this there. And then this extension was 1980s, awful. There was a manhole inside. It was unsavable. I mean, with all the open-mindedness in the world, you could not save that thing. Also because the space is so small that it really needs unity. So that diagrammatically speaking, this is what we did. We opened up the whole space into one big space. And then we've incorporated 3 simple volumes, or 3 simple moves. One was this triangle that's kind of reminiscent of the previous project, where there are all the technical aspects of it. There's a bar, there's a WC, there's all the storage that they need. The other one is a square. It's this kitchen, this rectangle with a kitchen, which is again a box inside the space. And the third one that softens everything is this circular roof light that brings light into the darkest area of the house, of the ground floor. all the while creating a clear area of focus and impact. And that's where we imagine the cellist playing music now. And so the result is this layout with this kind of entrance experience where you have this little bench here on the side. You see through this box that something is happening, but you don't know exactly what. In front of you, there's this special light coming down from the stairs, and you're kind of invited to flow into the middle of the space where you have this. These are two sliding doors where you have the option to go into the kitchen and view the front of the house, or you're basically pushed towards the rear of the house. And this table, as you can see it, this can be against the wall because sometimes he needs more space to practice. So there's a flip-up bench inside this piece of joinery, but the same table can be extended to 8 to 10 people if he has people around, and he can store. We bought the chairs for him to store in here so that he can have 10 people, or he can be on his own, or he can have 4 people to play the cello. On the upper floors, we've created all the technical aspects. And finally, on the top floor, we've created this access to the terrace, which is a very rare feature in London. So there's this roof terrace. And on the first floor, there is a green roof. So as we step inside, you see, there is this variety, different types of glass, different types of light coming from the street, from the stairs, from the kitchen. And this little detail of the marble step, this very differently, you can see the difference in light between the front and the rear. This is very white light. This is very much more soft. And then you see that the floor is laid parallel to this joinery, so it kind of invites you to come in. And then you step in and you follow this quirky shape defined by the joinery, and which takes you to the center of the house where you finally see the garden in front of you, or you see the garden because it's open. And so this is the table with its flexibility, with the bench that can flip down and disappear. And this is this kind of acoustic shape that opens up towards the garden, but also kind of protects you when you're playing. And all this wood as well is kind of thought as an acoustic enhancement to the room. Moving on, yes, again, these little marble details here and there. The roof light that kind of softens all these kind of hard shapes. And well, then photography. From the outside, you see, this is the brick I was talking to you about. This is reclaimed brick. This is the brick that was there, cleaned up, and then laid with flush mortar. And this stone is the same stone that we've used for the stair and other details around the house. That gives it just a little bit of character, but for the rest, it's just reclaimed brick. And you can see the green roof above. So the green roof collects water from the roof and slows its pace down. And of course, it improves the biodiversity in the area. And we've used, in this case, very high degrees of insulation. We've used as much timber as was feasible with the sections that we had. And you can see it because most of the, this is the view inside the kitchen, which is inside a box. Again, as much timber as possible, where we could, yes. And this is the kind of dramatic space under the roof light. The plaster is a plaster that allows water and air to move in. It's a lime plaster, so it's a natural material. Excuse me. It's a natural material, and the overall effect, I think, of using these natural materials is to have this toned down atmosphere that feels like very, very relaxing. And that's a beautiful supermodel using the library. But most importantly, I think in this picture is this direct relationship to the garden. So the garden is basically inside the house. And on the top floor, again, under the stairs that goes up to the terrace, there is a planter. This is the first floor bathroom, going up, climbing up the stairs. This is how we approach the old fabric, where we kept some of the items that we could, like the chimney breast here. We've exposed the old ceiling structure. This used to be flat, so very low. And we've brought in, again, more light. And here, this space under these steps that go up to the terrace, this is again a planter with a little tap. And this is the experience of the terrace. As you can see, it's a very special view of London. And this is it, I think.
Those are really, really nice work. And, my favorite part about both of them is actually how you use light to guide movement through the space, because it can be punched to such a narrow space to how you move, where to go. I think you've done that really, really nicely. It looks very, very
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why I've introduced myself as Southern Italian. I think we have this kind of illness here that we crave light because we're used to having much more compared to our light is also more kind of yellow. It's a warmer light. So I like the tone of this light because it's grayish. It's very, very delicate. But there are so many months in the year where we just crave more light. So when we approach a project, clearly we have this kind of heightened sensitivity towards light. And again, if you give us freedom, we create openings. In other projects, when we could not bring enough light inside a room, we would create a window between rooms so that one room would contribute to the other to just kind of expand the reach of this light. So yeah, it's true. It's one of our major concerns when we work.
That's nice. So lastly, in your opinion, to what extent do you think sustainable homes play an important role in future architecture?
Oh, I think it's massive. I think it's the one topic that people carry on missing, and I think even the government. So in like three main aspects. The first one is that small residential architecture is where architects are made. Is where we are growing the next generation of architects, clients, consultants. So all of this, they all grow up from the small, and then they become bigger and do more important or larger scale projects. The second is that, of course, from a sustainability point of view, thousands of small projects have a massive impact. In many ways, thousands of small projects, they have not only the cumulative impact of thousands of small boilers, thousands of small kind of electric bills, but they also have the impact of creating a culture and an economic milieu, an economic landscape of people and companies that are used to working in a certain way. So that's where, I think the government doesn't get it, because there are hardly very few discounts, for example, in this country for ecological design or sustainable design in the houses, in private houses, whereas there's much more attention in large developments. Excuse me. And the third one is the possibility of experimenting. And so that we have there's almost a year ago there has been a new war in Europe, which has very much affected us because we weren't used to it, and it feels like an aggression to many things that are kind of dear to us. But it's also an aggression that's related to energy and to pollution and to gas. So since last year, we've started this campaign that's called No More Gas. So we're not installing any more gas boilers into our houses, which is not very easy in this country because there aren't many alternatives. Actually, there aren't many alternatives in the world. But given the thermal requirements of houses here, where it's kind of cold in the winter, there's probably -1 now. It's very hard to achieve this. And so we've studied several possible solutions. We've created combinations to save money, and even if you have to do like a tiny project, we have identified ways of avoiding installing a boiler. Now, all of this is a little bit of experimentation that no one has done before, because it seems like there is no market for the small, because things are just too complex. Just people want to save money, And so there is this massive gap in the market and in the research, oriented at small projects that, again, cumulatively, so all together, make a massive difference.
But with your mindset, I think if everyone adopts the mindset that small projects can mean great impact, maybe you're only giving a home to one person, but the impact can be larger.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. So yeah, like you said, many projects in one have a massive impact in terms of energy and water, etc. But the most important impact is the cultural one. So another thing we do every year is called open house, where we open some of our projects to the public. We have hundreds of people coming in, and some of them are just curious, but they all get exposed to a similar conversation that you and I have just had. So we speak about sustainability, we speak about the quality of space, and we speak about the impact that small projects have. And in some cases, now we're starting to reach out to the neighbors of the people we're working with to discuss ways of collaborating, at least on the landscape design, to improve it. All these tiny gardens, each one with different plants that maybe are not, compatible, or they are in competition, could each one of these projects is an opportunity to create kind of a wider look on all these rare gardens that work together to absorb water and sustain biodiversity.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think as people, we have the ambition of having a massive impact, and sometimes thinking of the small project can be frustrating. Am I changing the life of one person for the next 20 years? But the reality is no, is not. You're not changing just one life, because you can expand the impact of your work by reaching out, by marketing and communicating like we're doing now, and by involving more people. And also, you are doing it by creating a culture around each project, a culture of consultants, clients, manufacturers, builders, that just improves all the time.
Yeah, and that it'll only be like, not only a positive feedback loop, but also like a domino effect. They can carry it on to their next projects or the next community they go to. So love learning about how you approach your work, about the studio. And it's such a great reminder about how we should approach not only sustainability, because I don't think there's a magic formula for making something sustainable, but it's thinking all about these different segments and how they can work together to finally make something that's for the future. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me, Karina. It's been a real pleasure.